So I tried that. I put my body in the bed. I let my skin touch my partner's skin. And instead of going, oh, I like this, I cried and fell asleep.
Dear Shandy. Welcome back to Dear Shandy, listeners. Hello, Andy.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing very good, I'm going to be honest.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, I'm very excited about today's guest. Today's guest is kind of a big deal. Can I say that?
A little bit.
Yeah, kind of a big deal. She is a therapist, writer, educator, researcher, and activist. She has a PhD in health behavior with a concentration in human sexuality. She is the author of the mega hit, Come As You Are. Everyone has heard of it. And the co-author of Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. She has multiple TED Talks online, and can be found on Instagram at Nagoski and on TikTok at Emily Nagoski. And finally, her latest book, Come Together, The Science and Art of Creating Lasting Sexual Connections. And we're just so excited. Emily Nagoski, thank you for joining us.
Hello.
Thank you. That was a delightful introduction. I'm thrilled to be here.
And before we get going, we have a quick disclaimer. Whenever we have a therapist on, I always like to mention that today's
So the only word of that, I'm not a therapist. I'm an educator.
Oh.
I got a master's degree in counseling. I trained to be a sex therapist, and about halfway through, I was like, I do not have the magical something or other it takes to sit with people and go, what was that like for you? I don't have it. So I became an educator only. So you do not need your, the disclaimer. I can do the not a therapist disclaimer right for you.
Very nice.
Okay, what's funny about this is when I was assembling my notes for you, Emily Nagoski, PhD, I literally was like going through your website and it was like the about section. And I was like, okay, she studied like psychology, but like I wasn't sure.
Right.
And so finally I literally Googled, is Emily Nagoski a therapist? I am not kidding you. And then you know how now they have this like AI result?
The AI summary?
It said she was.
Yeah.
It said she was.
The AI summary said that she...
And this is what's running our planet. See?
The AI summary also says that 27 degrees is not a temperature at which water freezes because water freezes at 32 degrees.
Oh, dear.
Literally.
Oh, dear.
That's, yeah.
Oh, we're in trouble.
We are in trouble.
We're in big trouble.
Because, you know, I
Yeah.
blindly trusted that.
You
I
gotta
let it...
turn the AI summaries off if you can.
Isn't that the whole point of AI, to not have to turn it off? Wow. That's a big fail.
Okay, well, I've been let down by AI. Thank you, Emily Nagoski. I can't just say Emily.
Not the last time that's going to happen in our lives.
Well, but I really love your candor, your honesty. And yeah, I think your candor and your honesty is what has made you such a big success. And so we're going to get right to it today.
Let's talk about sex.
We're going to talk about sex, baby.
Heck yes.
Especially in relationships, because I think a lot of times we cover more like dating side of things. But you know, there are a lot of people who've been together for a long ass time and maybe don't, do the sexy stuff that much, not as much as they once did. So before we get going, I want to ask you, when you were researching, preparing this book, how many myths, or what you later would discover were myths, did you encounter about relationships and sex?
I mean, the reason I started writing this book in the first place. Okay, so first of all, writing Come As You Are, which was absolutely worth it. I don't know how much time y'all have spent writing books in your life, but it was so stressful that even though I was thinking and writing and reading and talking about sex all the time, I was so exhausted and stressed and overwhelmed that I lost all interest in actually having any sex with my newlywed husband at the time. We'd been married for less than a year when I started writing Come As You Are. So I finished the book and things got better. And then I went on a book tour and things got a lot worse. And so I had to be, so I tried to follow my own advice. So the advice in Come As You Are is, responsive desire. It's chapter 7, I think, if people just want to skip to that. You put your body in the bed. with your certain special someone. You let your skin touch your partner's skin. And a lot of times what happens is your body goes, oh, right, I really like this. I really like this person. This is a great idea. That's responsive desire. And it's how sex usually works in long-term relationships. So I tried that. I put my body in the bed. I let my skin touch my partner's skin. And instead of going, oh, I like this, I cried and fell asleep. And I was like, I need more advice than I give in my own book. So I did what any good nerd does. I went to Google Scholar and I looked at the peer-reviewed science on how couples sustain strong sexual relationships over the long term, the research on people who self-identify as having extraordinary sex lives. And what I found there, the broad narrative about sex in long-term relationships, there's sort of like two camps. There's two schools of thought. There's intimacy is the enemy of desire. You need distance in order to keep the spark alive. And
that's the Esther Perel school, isn't it?
Yeah, like in
Mating
desire, you
captivity.
need a bridge to cross.
Yes.
And then there's the intimacy is the key to desire. You need closeness to keep the spark alive. And here's the thing, the people who keep the spark alive, the people who self-identify as having extraordinary sex lives, do not talk about spark. They don't talk about desire. It barely scrapes into the top 10 characteristics of extraordinary sex. Desire is not the thing. It's not even that it's a myth I bumped into. It's that the entire conversation we have about sex in long-term relationships starts in the wrong place. It starts with the desire. And if we were doing it the way people who have great long-term sexual relationships do it, we would start with pleasure. They like the sex that they have.
Pleasure. It sounds so simple, doesn't it?
Which is why it takes 100,000 words of mostly affective neuroscience for me to explain how to put pleasure at the center of your definition of sexual well-being and let desire fall into place when you center pleasure.
Oh, okay. That's actually going really deep to the point where I almost wonder if that would help with life in general.
Yeah, it's very meta philosophical stuff.
Yeah. If you, instead of basing it on desire, you're like,
let go of the urge and just experience the feeling of goodness.
Oh my goodness. Pleasure. It sounds so simple. Well, that brings me to our interview questions, because we have different categories. And the first category is long-term relationships. So let's say we have a couple and, they've been together for, let's say, 10 years. And let's say it once was really hot and heavy, but now they find that they have mismatched libidos. This was, I'm sure you're used to this question. It was by far the most asked question we received.
It is the single most common reason why couples of any gender combination seek sex therapy. Yes.
Really? Okay. So one person wants it more than the other, and it's creating discord.
Yeah.
What do you tell those people?
So there's a couple of different ways to approach it. One is, so let's put this couple in a therapist's office. And because this is my imaginary situation, I'm going to grant them the honor of having Peggy Kleinplatz, who is a researcher and therapist in Ottawa. She's going to be their therapist. And
wait, Ottawa, Canada?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm from Ottawa, not to make this about me, but usually the person referenced is not in Ottawa, so I'm just excited right now.
Yeah, Canada is home to some of the most important sex research that happens in the world now.
What?
Yeah.
Damn. Okay. I'll take it. Continue. I'm sorry.
Including Peggy's work. She has interviewed dozens of people who self-identify as having magnificent, optimal sexual experiences, and she uses that research to inform her clinical work. So if a couple comes in and one partner is more interested in having sex and the other partner is so not interested that they say, I used to be into it, but honestly, I'd be fine if we never had sex again. Peggy's question would be, well, so tell me about this sex you do not want. And do you suppose that they are going to describe to her sex that feels connected and joyful and playful and authentic and vulnerable? Or are they going to describe sex that is
icky?
Methodical.
Boring.
Dismal and disappointing.
Hot.
Yeah.
Very, very temperature hot, but not
Yeah.
figuratively hot.
Not good. Yeah. And Peggy, being who she is, will say, well, I rather like sex, but if that's the sex I were having, I wouldn't want it either. So tell me, what kind of sex is worth wanting?
Playful.
Yeah.
Exploratory.
Yeah.
Upside down.
Curious.
Yes.
Connected. Playful is actually, I think, the single most important part of the answer, as a matter of fact. But so that's if the answer is actually we don't like the sex. That's not a desire problem. That's a pleasure problem. Of course you don't want it is not dysfunctional not to want sex you do not like. This literally was a conversation I had in real life with friends. We went out to drink. My friends had 5 academic degrees between them and 2 kids under 5. And they were like, just out of curiosity, no particular reason, how do couples sustain a strong sexual connection over the long term? And I was like, well, you put your body in the bed, you let your skin touch your partner's skin. These are the things I say. And one of the partners literally pushed herself away from the table and went, ugh. I was like, okay, so there is your problem. This is not a desire problem. It is a pleasure problem. You do not like the sex, so of course you don't want the sex.
But wait, was this person's partner at the table?
Yes.
Oh.
Oh, dear.
That sounds a little hurt.
Well, at least they have open dialogue.
I know.
They got
Very honest.
divorced.
There
were
they don't
other
have
things
open
going
dialogue.
on. There
Too
were
much
other
open dialogue.
And it's often the case that there's other stuff that's interfering. Because let's think about it. If you are feeling connected and supported and really listened to and heard in your relationship, you're feeling really good about the connection, and you're already like starting to do some warm-up sexy things, and your partner tickles you. Tickling is not everybody's favorite. It is some people's favorite. But even if tickling's not your favorite, if you're already feeling great about the connection and good about like the little bit of stuff you've done already, your brain will interpret that sensation as something that feels playful and good and potentially lead to other things. But if you don't feel connected in that relationship, if you are stressed out, if you are in the middle of an argument about something, and that same certain special someone tickles you, your brain is going to, how's that going to feel? Is that going to feel like amazing and good and playful and fun and like you could do other things? No, it's the same sensation. It's the same person, but because the emotional context is different, the way your brain interprets that sensation is the opposite. Which is why pleasure sounds so simple. And it is if the context is right. So it's about creating a context together where your brain will interpret the sensation as pleasurable.
What advice would you give to a couple on how to get started with that?
Concrete, specific things. So there are 4 questions that I like people to answer separately first. And then if they can bring themselves to have the conversation with your partner, yes, have this conversation. 4 questions. 1, what is it that you want when you want sex? And the answer is, people jokingly would be like, orgasm. I mean, you can do that by yourself. 95% of people can have an orgasm on their own. And if that's not you, there's whole books and workshops just about that. But among the 95% of people who have orgasms by themselves, what is it about sex that you want when you want it with a person, not you, right? What is it about them being there that matters? What is it, crucially, that you don't want when you don't want sex? What is it that you like when you like sex? And what is it that you don't like when you don't like sex? Write your answers down and talk about your answers with your partner, because probably you're like making up stories in your minds about why your partner's saying yes and no to certain things and like taking it personally and inventing all kinds of things that are not what's happening in your partner's head. Maybe when your partner says they have a headache, they actually literally just have a headache.
What is the most common answer then that you discovered? What is it that you like when you like sex?
Intimacy, I bet.
Intimacy?
I bet it's intimacy.
I think it's feeling desired.
I like that.
Both of those things. So the 4 most common answers to what is it that I want when I want sex, and what is it that I like, are in fact connection. So intimacy, connection, because it's about having another person there. And feeling or being desired is also on the list.
Ding, ding, ding.
Shared pleasure is number 3. It's I don't just want to like rub my body up against someone and feel how nice that feels for me. I want to rub my body up against someone and have them feel like it feels nice too. I want to witness their pleasure and I want them to witness my pleasure. That shared pleasure is a really important component of what people are looking for when they want sex with someone else. And then the last of the 4 most common answers to this question is something that I call freedom, which is like you want to close the door on all your other responsibilities and all your other identities and roles in life. And you just want to let yourself disappear into the pleasure of what's happening right in this moment with this person.
I like that one.
Me
and I
too.
think that also leads to the other thing that I think, which is great about sex, is that it's one of the very few things as a human we get to do that are actually the proper animal things that we should be doing, which is eating, sleeping, pooping, and having
And
sex
what?
with someone.
So, Andy, we are recording this Huel ad after having recorded a whole episode. And I'm going to tell you, I could really use some Huel right now.
Yeah. Where's our Huel?
Yeah, our Huel energy drinks. And normally at home in New York, we have a ton of Huel in our fridge. And this is the exact moment. This is the moment right now where I'd be like, and I would go to the fridge and take a swig of the blue raspberry. It's the best one.
A delicious pick-me-up.
A delicious pick-me-up.
With all the health benefits.
Yes, each can has 133 health benefits, 200 milligrams of caffeine, and not like jolty energy. It's smooth, sustained energy. I love that. Like you feel the difference. It doesn't feel like, like it gives you like
anxiety.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes when I have an energy drink, I'm like, oh, I don't like that feeling. Huel, it's so smooth. It just gives me the pick-me-up I need. Plus, they have 27 vitamins and minerals.
And it comes in delectable flavors like watermelon, blue raspberry, and pineapple and mango.
They really have the flavors figured out over at Huel. So these Energy Plus drinks, by the way, have no sugar. So you get that delicious flavor. The flavors are really good.
Yeah.
I cannot stress this enough because I've had my share of energy drinks where I'm just not interested. I don't like the jitters. I don't like the flavor. It's like gross. It reminds me of like cough syrup.
Yeah.
Huel has their flavors down.
So take the leap and join the community of Hueligans.
Get 15% off your order with code DearShandy at Huel. That's HUEL.com.
That's 15% off with code DearShandy at Huel.com.
Unlock a healthier, easier way to fuel your day with Huel.
Nutritionally complete energy in minutes so you can focus on what really matters.
So we poll our shandies when we bring on a guest like yourself for questions. And there really was an overwhelming theme of people who our listeners who were the ones who wanted sex less than their partner.
Feeling pressured?
Yes, but they wanted to want it more. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't that they just didn't want it. It's like, I wish I wanted it.
So when people have they're not that interested in sex, but they want to be interested in sex, that what is it that I don't want when I don't want sex is a really important question. And one of the fastest ways to reduce your interest in sex is to beat yourself up for not being interested in sex. The mechanism in your brain that makes sex happen is called the dual control mechanism. And it has 2 parts. You can tell by the name. One is the sexual accelerator, which notices all the sex-related information in the environment, and it sends the turn-on signal that a lot of us are used to. But then the second part, if the first part's the accelerator, we know the second part's going to be the brakes. And that is the part that notices all the good reasons not to be turned on. And it sends the turn off signal. So the process of becoming aroused is this dual process of turning on the ons, yes, but more importantly, turning off those offs. And if you are judging yourself or beating yourself up or feeling crappy about your body, that stuff is all hitting the brakes. So when you get rid of the pressure, when you get rid of your criticism of yourself, you get rid of those judgments, that's when the brake is freed up and the accelerator can do its thing. In fact, the most common thing that people don't want when they don't want sex is a sense of obligation.
What are some of the others? I'm really curious. I find that question to be arguably the most interesting one.
sense of obligation was like
by far
twice as many as the next thing. And then comes other stuff that is a version of a sense of obligation, like having to perform my sexuality for my partner, not knowing what I want and like, and so I can't communicate with my partner, not knowing how to tell my partner what I like, or feeling like I'm not allowed to talk about what I don't like.
So let's say it's sense of obligation. Is therefore the best way to overcome that to communicate to your partner that you don't like it when you feel obligated?
The number one best way is for the higher desire partner to take sex off the table.
Really?
For a long time, for a time period that feels substantial, to be like, not only is sex not an obligation, you have no duty to me, but I'm going to say, let's not have sex. I am taking it off the table. I want to make sure you feel like there's no pressure so that we can hug and kiss and cuddle, and you're not worried in your mind about, is my partner going to interpret this as like, I want sex, and oh no, now do I have to do things? And like that whole thing that happens in your head when you're the lower desire partner and you want sex, but like that chatter in your head, is that hitting the accelerator? Those sexy thoughts? That stuff is hitting the brakes, right?
Yeah. That is a fascinating answer and not what I was expecting at all. And we exchanged glances because I think it sounds quite familiar. It's like, oh, that lingering hug is this, especially when you've been together for a while and you're living together, it's sort of like, well, is this leading to something? Is this what this means? It's like, you know each other too well. And so at what point then is the no sex period? Are you waiting for the lower sex drive partner to then want it again? Or is it about building trust? Like, what happens then?
So we're talking about creating a context that makes it easy for your brain to interpret sensations as pleasurable. And that context where someone feels obligated or the other partner is feeling like resentful and deprived, but also critical of themselves for maybe like feeling things, and they don't want to put pressure on their partner, but also they kind of want to put pressure on their partner. Like nobody feels great in that situation. Everybody feels like something is wrong. So you create a context where there isn't any pressure or performance expectation. There's no demand. There's just like, we are going to set up a time when like there's no kids in the house and the phones are out of the room, and we can have a quiet half an hour or an hour to just like let our bodies touch skin to skin, knowing that it is not about having a sexual experience. It's about the intimacy and touch and play and sense of connection that we share with each other. And this is without any expectation, in fact, making it against the rules for it to be a sexual experience.
Wow.
There's a therapist, Dr. Lex, Sex with Dr. Lex is her username on various social media platforms. And she recommends an exercise where you just get naked with your partner and you alternate saying a body part that you really appreciate about your partner, saying what it is you appreciate, and then touching it in an affectionate way.
Oh my God, that's so cute.
It's really good. Everybody should do
it. That's beautiful.
So these are some of the ways that people collaborate as a partnership to create a context where it's easy for your brain to interpret sensations as pleasurable. A lot of it has to do with, and if you want to like make lists, if that's easy for you, of like things that I know for sure activate my accelerator, the smell of my partner, wearing sexy underwear, seeing my partner mow the lawn, like whatever the things are.
Yeah.
And like make a list of the things that activate your brakes, the stuff that hits your brakes. I mean, like for some people, that's like the smell of my partner, wearing sexy underwear, seeing my partner mow the lawn, because people vary tremendously. And the things that are turn-ons for some people is shut everything down for other people. Make sure on the breaks list, you're thinking about your internal experience too. It's not just sensations. It's also everything that you think, believe, or imagine. It's your internal body sensations. Like if you are stressed, overwhelmed, exhausted, fatigued, sick, having digestive distress, right? Like these are things that very likely for a lot of people are going to hit the brakes. Make sure all that stuff makes the list. And then you can look at each other's list and think about another exercise as you're having these conversations with your partner. Like, what was a time in my life when it was easy for me to like sexual sensations? What was the context there? What was going on with my other life circumstances, like with my stress level, with how I felt about my body? What was going on in our relationship? How was my own mental and physical well-being? What were the characteristics of my partner that were making it easy for me to like what was happening sexually? When you think about, think of at least 3 contexts where it was easy, and like look at what the overlapping factors are. And between these 3 exercises, the 4 questions and the lists of what hits your accelerator and what hits your brake, and thinking through like what are 3 contexts where it has been easy for me to want and like the sex, you will unveil a lot of like pattern of what works for you and what really, really does not work for you. You're going to see that it probably changes over your lifetime. Because bodies change. I'm 48 almost, and things change over time. Thanks, perimenopause. It's not surprising to me when people are having these conversations for the first time, even if they've been together for 10 or 20. My very first couple that I ever saw in my earliest training as a sex therapist, they were in their 70s. They'd been together since they were teenagers.
Wow.
And they came in because they hadn't had sex for like 15 years.
Wow.
That's a lot of years.
And they hadn't had any of the kinds of conversations that we were going to talk about in sex therapy. Of course they hadn't, because when were they supposed to learn how to communicate with someone about sex?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's sort of, it kind of feels like, based on Cosmo magazine, which doesn't cover really real life relationships, you sort of just like go into it, fingers crossed, hoping that you're both going to want it the exact same amount.
The exact same kind
time.
of sex, the exact same frequency, the exact same duration.
Yeah.
Every day, you're going to match for decades.
Yeah. And you're going to come at the exact same time every time.
Every time. Can I just say about spontaneous orgasm, it is nice. It's fun. I get why people are interested in it. And also, it's a party trick. It is not even close to a requirement for having a spectacular sex life.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's like, if you want to like work toward that as a goal, sure. But the thing is, like, there's no such thing as failure with a project like that, because if you end up having asynchronous orgasms, like, you still got to have orgasms and still enjoyed it. There's no such thing as failure. So if you want to play with simultaneous orgasm, do you go for it? It's fun. And also, like, there's nothing better really about a simultaneous orgasm than about any other kind of orgasm. No orgasm is better or worse than any other kind of orgasm. The only thing that is a measure of an orgasm is whether or not you wanted and liked it.
Well, so speaking of which, that's the perfect segue. I had a fork in the road of what direction to take, and you just led me to another common question.
Let's go to the orgasm path.
Yes. Many people, and we've had this podcast for 4.5 years, and in the first year we were getting this question, and here we are 4.5 years later. Tips for orgasming.
Yeah. Rule number 1 to having an orgasm, same with desire, take orgasm off the table. If you are struggling with orgasm altogether, like you've never had an orgasm, or you have only had orgasm under very specific circumstances and you'd like to expand the circumstances where you have orgasm, take orgasm off the table. Your job is to explore how intense you can get the pleasure to be in your body without having an orgasm. Because, like, remember that brakes and gas thing? What happens for a lot of people who struggle with orgasm is they'll get a lot of pleasure, a high level of arousal, and a thing will happen in their brain where they're like, maybe I'll have an orgasm this time. What if I don't have an orgasm this time? Am I having an orgasm right now? Oh no, what's going on? And that chatter, that loop in your brain
is the problem.
It's hitting the brakes.
Yeah.
And the main thing you need, like neurologically, the thing you have to get to orgasm is have the brakes go dark and just like the accelerator explodes everywhere. So
that's a tough exercise, actually. I feel like that could apply to life in general.
it's
like
literally
turn
a
off.
mindfulness practice. Yeah.
Yes, literally. Like I
Yeah.
hear what you're talking about. I've been there in a sexual context and also in every aspect of like life as well.
Yeah. Performance anxiety, the yips, like as an artist, you know the experience of like the more you worry about whether or not you're doing it right,
Yeah.
the harder it becomes. It's literally called the ironic process.
Oh, really? That's the name for it?
Yeah.
Ugh, even that name.
Awful.
It is really, sometimes so I'm an opera singer, that's my day job.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I'm singing a high note and I'm like holding it, sometimes like while I'm
You
singing.
start to think about it.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, this is going well. And then I'm like, but how do I really do this? Like, do I even know? and then I'm like, stop it. And then I just go back to singing.
And what about when you forget how to pee?
Yeah.
One guy standing like 3 feet from me. I'm like, how do I do this? How do I make the stuff come out?
Neurologically, it is the same thing. So the thing that allows the muscle in your pelvic floor to relax is it's turning off the brakes is what it takes to relax that muscle so that you can pee. So like literally your brakes are on and that is what's preventing you from being able to pee.
Yeah.
Because you're stuck.
Yeah.
So it's literally the same with an orgasm.
I mean, in the case of peeing, it is the actual same mechanism
it's the pelvic
that
floor.
is interfering with
Frozen.
peeing, that interferes with arousal.
Yeah.
And in terms of art and performance, it's the same neurological, don't think about a white bear. Whatever you do on pain of death, don't think about a white bear. And if you have to think about a white bear, it better not be wearing a polka dot tutu.
Oh, damn it.
That's self-monitoring of being worried about orgasm. It's actually the same thing as insomnia. The number one problem that interferes with people's ability to fall asleep is worrying about falling asleep.
Yes.
Like you get in bed and you were exhausted as you got into your pajamas. You lay your body down and and then your brain comes on and is like, oh no, what if I don't fall asleep?
Yeah.
Especially
I really
if,
need to get a good night's sleep tonight.
I really need all that performance pressure, that demand, that expectation is a great way to ruin a night's sleep. Yeah.
Well, sometimes it's not what a lot of what drugs do for sleep and for sex. People who take drugs before sex, people who take drugs to sleep. It's really shutting off your mind.
Yeah.
In one way or another.
In particular, just directly targets that.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
At a low dose, it can actually. So back when I was training as a sex therapist, the clinical notes used to say, before you do your sex homework, which isn't really having sex, but if you want to have a glass of wine or two, that can help, because the first thing that alcohol, it has a biphasic effect. It doesn't matter. The first thing that alcohol does is shut down the prefrontal cortex, all the chatter and noise and social anxiety. That is the stuff that is the reason alcohol is called a social lubricant. Beyond 1 or 2, though, the first thing alcohol does is turn off the brakes. Beyond that, it starts to turn off the accelerator, which is why too much alcohol causes whiskey dick and delayed orgasm.
Whiskey dick?
You've never heard of whiskey dick?
I have never heard of whiskey dick. For me, I'm
you're just
excited.
so lucky to be with a guy who just doesn't even know what whiskey dick is.
Who doesn't drink to excess. Hooray.
Whiskey dick. I like that. Catchy. Okay, so beyond the, shutting off of the mind.
Right.
And,
so you
and taking orgasm
pleasure
off the table. Yeah. Do you have something they should think about, or should they just not be thinking?
So the thing is, as you begin to experience pleasure in different parts of your body, your brain is going to start worrying about that sensation. It's a mindfulness practice. It's literally a mindfulness practice. You notice that thought is happening and you're like, hello, thought. I can have this worry literally any other time, but for this 15 minutes or this half an hour or whatever you want it to be, I'm just going to set this thought over here and I'm going to return my attention to the pleasurable things that are happening in my body. I'm going to notice these sensations and I'm going to welcome them as a natural part of living in this mammalian body. And here's another worry. And hello, worry. I'm going to set you right on over here and I can have you literally any other time. And right now, I'm just going to, you practice turning your attention toward pleasure and feeling safe experiencing that pleasure. A lot of us, one of the other things that makes pleasure complicated is that we have been taught to feel ashamed of pleasure.
Yes.
We've been taught to feel like it is selfish and how dare we, that it doesn't matter at all. If people are survivors of trauma of any kind, but in particular sexual trauma, you've been taught that those sensations are actually dangerous.
Yes.
So when you notice your body experiencing those sensations, the part of you that wants to protect you from that situation, like, comes in like a superhero. And that part of you needs to learn that you can that you are safe now, that you can experience these sensations and you are still safe. So you start out real slow and really gradually and really indirect and gradually allow the pleasure to increase in volume and you're still safe. And this is happening over like a couple times a week, every week for months. It can be, depending on like what a person's situation is. The oldest age at which a person has told me they've had their first orgasm, she was 73.
Wow.
Oh dear. Wow.
Literally never too late.
That's so inspiring. Most people would reach that age and be like, well, I'm just one of the people who can't.
Yeah.
Period. Yeah. Well, so on that note, one of the questions we got from a Shandy was, quote, what does it mean if you feel things are too intense and you stop orgasm before it comes?
So that could be like exactly the thing I was talking about, is like the intensity of it. You feel out of control and that activates worry or fear. And so you shut it down because you're like, no, I feel out of control. I like something is happening in my body and I'm not sure what's going to happen. Or it could be sensory experience. So people have different, I'm on the spectrum. And when I talk to autistic people, they often talk about hypersensitivity or hyposensitivity. But if things get too intense, their brain really is just like overloaded. And the weird thing is, so if you are the first situation where like you're just worried and afraid, by yourself, because things are often easier when you don't have to worry about whether or not your partner is okay.
Yeah.
Especially if you got raised as a girl, you got taught to believe that your partner's experience matters much more than yours. And so like you get into a sexual situation and instead of paying attention to the pleasurable things happening in your body, so much of your attention is allocated to monitoring whether or not your partner feels good. So if that happens in your brain, then when you are by yourself, allow the sensation to grow. And notice that a part of you is like, I feel overwhelmed by how big the sensation is. Notice that you are safe, that nothing that happens in the sensation of your body is unsafe. These are the normal sensations that go along with a high level of arousal, and you allow it. You just allow it just a little bit more. What if it's just a little bit more?
Okay.
And gradually you'll adapt and feel safe. Betty Dodson, the late, great Betty Dodson, has a series of videos that she made. She's an orgasm coach. So she would stay with women while they masturbated to orgasm. These are women who struggled in all kinds of ways. And she would give them a Hitachi magic wand and a washcloth to lay over their mons, and they would masturbate. And so many of these women had this experience where they pull the vibrator away right as they get close to orgasm because they feel overwhelmed and they're unsure. And it's just a habit. They pull it away. Do I tell this story? Yeah, I do. I tell this story. So I was traveling in Europe. I was doing work and a woman told me this story. She read Come As You Are, and then she watched her adult brother changing his baby daughter's diaper. And so the baby was all clean. Dad just turns to get a diaper. And when he turns back, baby daughter is touching her own genitals. And he goes, don't touch that. And she was like, and I wondered, like, how would he have responded if his baby had had a penis instead? Or how would he have felt if his baby had been touching her? Don't we love it when babies find their feet? Did you find your feet? Did you find your feet? Are you a baby? What if we felt that way when our babies found their genitals? Did you find your vulva? Are you such a baby? Do you have a vulva?
Oh.
That's a great point. It takes the weight off.
Yeah.
Right? And the thing is, this baby's not going to remember this experience.
No.
It's a tiny, tiny baby. But that experience is going to accumulate with countless other similar types of experiences until there is a dark place in her brain where her vulva sensations should be. And so I think about all of these women pulling the vibrator away from their genitals as they get close to orgasm. And I wonder, like, how much they got shamed for their body in ways that they don't even remember, that just lives on in the way their hand automatically pulls away as they get closer and closer to orgasm.
That's so interesting.
Wow.
So Betty Dodson says, stay with it, move into it, don't let it go.
So I wonder if
So let me just say that if you are the like hypersensitive, overwhelmed, the ironic thing to do, I know, is actually to increase sensations somewhere else. Like one person said that they had learned to put a weighted blanket over the top half of their body, which balanced out the intensity of the sensation happening in the lower half of their body.
Ooh.
It just spreads out the intensity so that it's not all focused in one place. People are so worried about desire, and I want to take all their worry about desire and be like, pleasure.
Yeah.
Pleasure, though. Pay attention to pleasure. And I know you've been trained your whole life to believe that pleasure is a waste or selfish or... So in a way, there's a scientist who has suggested that pleasure is a sign that you can stop paying attention because it means you've solved whatever the problem is. And evolutionarily, it makes sense to move. Like once you've solved the problem, good, we're done.
Yeah.
We can stop paying attention to this. So the task of staying attuned to pleasure isn't intuitive. We have to practice it. We have to learn it. And if we did not get raised in a culture that valued pleasure, which I don't know about you, but I was raised in the 80s in Delaware. Pleasure was not a priority.
I mean, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
It was more like what you should do. The right thing to do.
So what do you say
Yes.
to someone who doesn't have an issue with pleasure or any negative associations with pleasure or self-pleasure, whatever you want
I
to call it?
want to know who that person is.
Yeah, not right. but what about the person who has an issue with losing control, which is what happens when you orgasm?
It doesn't have to be, but it absolutely can be. When you can stay in control when you're in orgasm, that's how you get extended orgasms. And that is also a meditation practice. But that's another thing. So when people lose control, fear losing control of their bodies, again, you were not born being afraid of losing control of your body. You were born not in control of your body. And we are raised pretty much from birth to be in control, to learn how to be in control of our bodies, some of us more than others. But if you have internalized that message that you have to be in control all the time, it's going to take practice. Losing control. And I really recommend, because it is very unlikely that sex is the only domain in your life where you
course.
have
I
the
knew she was going to
experience
say
of
that.
worrying about losing control. Practice releasing little bits of control in some other domain in your life. What would be an example of a different domain? Peeing and pooping, honestly. I went through a thing in when I was in grad school. I made it a project to get better about peeing and pooping in the woods. I wanted to go on like multi-day hikes. And the first time I tried, I didn't pee or poop for like 38 hours.
No.
Ouch.
Because I couldn't.
You couldn't let it go.
I couldn't. So I had to practice.
So you just held on to it? How is that better?
Wow.
It was very uncomfortable.
Oh.
I guess that answers the question. Does a PhD shit in the woods?
Yeah.
The answer is no.
No, but I
Not
practiced
anymore.
and I learned to. And
Yay.
honestly, I did you do systematic desensitization or graded exposure where like you move toward gradually more and more out of control situations. So I started pooping in the tub into a plastic bag because the tub was right next to the toilet, right?
Did you look at the toilet while you did it?
At first, yes.
Do you have videos of this practice?
Amazing.
This was way more than 20 years ago. But like, this is the sort of like gradual practice. Like, this was it wasn't a sexual context, but like my need to be in control of my body was so deeply ingrained that even when I desperately needed to, I could not let go.
Yeah.
So I had to practice. And because I took baby steps, literally just like one step over from the toilet to the tub into a plastic bag and throw it in the trash in the dumpster outside my apartment building. Sorry about the gory details.
No, that's amazing.
I love it. And I
appreciate the share.
I already feel inspired because I do feel like I have too much control over my body and it does hold me back. I've been wanting to get into dance lately because I'm not a good dancer. And I always find dancing very intimidating. But when if I've had a few drinks and the stars align, I'm like, I have a really great time. It's just so hard. My instinct is always like, no, I don't want that. Like, I don't want to dance. And so I feel inspired after this conversation to do that. But before we let you go, because we're running out of time, and I really wanted to build on something you said earlier, back to those sort of long-term relationships, you touched on breaks. One of the breaks is like stress, family life, kids, logistics, planning, all of that, because we did get a lot of questions along those lines. What advice would you have for couples where it's like, yeah, sex would be nice, but there's just too many things on the to-do list?
Yeah. Oh,
sorry, I know that was a hard pivot.
But it is the most important question for couples in long-term relationships. So I started this by talking about how I went and looked at the research about long-term relationships because I was struggling in my relationship. And the ultimate answer, the couples who sustain a strong sexual connection collaborate to co-create a context that makes it easy to be interested in sex. And those couples share three characteristics. One, they really like each other. They are friends who admire and trust each other. They're really good friends. I didn't think this was controversial at all until I started like traveling around and talking about it. It turns out to say that it's much more important that you really like your partner than that you really want your partner feels very complicated for people when a lot of us were raised to believe that friendship and sexual desire were incompatible. The absolute opposite is true. Friendship is the foundation of a great long-term sexual connection. The second characteristic, and this is the one that really matters for this question, is they prioritize sex. They decide that it matters, that it contributes something unique and important to their connection, so much so that they're willing to protect the time and energy that it takes to connect with each other erotically on a regular basis. This doesn't mean that these couples never lose track of each other sexually. It means that they are motivated to find their way back because it matters to them.
That almost feels like a therapy thing, like a couples therapy thing. It's like, do you prioritize this the same way I do?
Yeah. And it does take time and energy. And like, look, people are busy. We have a lot of things that we could be doing. So why would we spend when we could be watching Severance, for crying out loud? Why would we like take off our clothes and roll around and lick each other? Why would we do that? And what is it that sex contributes to your relationship that makes it worth protecting that time and energy? And especially if you have kids, like you're gonna have to put in some extra effort to create that time and protected space. Yeah. To have that kind of connection. The third characteristic, this is of the couples who sustain a strong sexual connection. The first one was they're friends who admire and trust each other. The second is they prioritize sex. It matters to them. The third, and this is, I acknowledge it's the hard one. It is the difficult one, excuse me. They recognize that they've been following other people's rules about who they're supposed to be as sexual people and how they're supposed to do a sexual relationship, and they decide to stop. They decide to figure out what rules work for them in this season of their lives, in this relationship, in this season of this relationship. And they follow rules that work for them, regardless of what anybody else's opinion is of who they are and how they're supposed to be as sexual people.
Oh, that is beautiful. That's like a self-love, self-growth, like butterfly moment.
It's also a partner love because, man, when you can take off your like idea of who your partner is supposed to be as a sexual person with you and really receive them as the sexual person they are, it is us. And I'm not saying that it is easy, but this is the step that grants you access to the kinds of sexual experience that turns the universe into rainbows.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It's not easy, but oh, it's worth it.
I want to end there because that's the perfect place to end, but I want one more question for you, Emily Nagoski. It's about confidence, self-image confidence, because I love that idea of the butterfly. You're like, I don't play by anyone's rules, blah, blah, blah. But let's say you've had 2 kids. Your body doesn't look the way it once did. And maybe you just don't, or maybe you've never
doesn't act the way it once did.
Yeah, maybe all over you're just like, but I just don't feel like the goddess that I am. What advice would you give to those people?
So there's a lot of different approaches you can take. One is there's an activity I call the mirror exercise. It's from something else. Eric Stice developed it for college women. But if you take off as much clothing as you're comfortable taking off, preferably naked, you look in a mirror and you write down everything you see that you like. And what's the first thing that's going to happen in your head, of course, is this is going to be all the stuff that you've been told that you're supposed to feel self-critical about. That's fine. You can have those self-critical thoughts some other time. Right now, you're just going to write. If it is like your eyelashes, if it is your kneecaps, if it is your ankle bones, if it's your spirit, because you can see it in your eyes, you write down what you see that you can like. And you do that again tomorrow, and you do it again the next day, and again and again. And the more often you do it, the more you will inoculate yourself against all the cultural messages that are telling you that there is anything about your body that is anything less than a frackin' miracle. And it will help you to stay connected to the reality of what this is. That's one of the really important and you got to do it. You're going to have to do it over and over again because every 5 years your body changes so much. It's a different body.
It's crazy.
It's bananas. Having a body is totally wacky. Yeah. And then there's also like the shortcuts. So I mentioned that I'm 48. I got the perimenopausal situation happening. And you know what? Like for all that I can love and appreciate my body, I can also just use the shortcut of putting on a fancy bra to put my boobs back where they used to be. And it just like shortcuts past all the emotional work. And I can just be like, this is good.
Yeah, and let it be good. Let it be good. Let that be enough. I love that advice. I think that's beautiful. It's like rewiring your brain, basically, to love what you see. Yeah. And it takes practice. I mean, what I'm hearing in all your advice, you know, I think a lot of people want a shortcut. It's like, oh, if I do this, then I'm going to orgasm, blah, 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 blah. But it's, you know, all of this.
You want a shortcut to orgasm and you're new to orgasm, get a vibrator.
Hitachi magic wand, or is there another one that you?
Yeah, is that the gold standard?
Wand is like if you want something big and loud that's going to get the job done. That's the Hitachi magic wand. It is the Cadillac of vibrators. The Stradivarius of vibrators is the Lilo. It is small. It is rechargeable, little battery operated thing, and you can have diffuse stimulation, or you can have really focused, targeted, right at the tip stimulation. So it allows for a very wide variety of sensations. L-E-L-O, Lilo.
Oh, Stradivarius. What a reference, Emily Nagoski.
No.
Very highbrow.
I'm a family of musicians. Everyone's a musician except me.
Oh, and what a delight it has been to have you. Thank you for being so not only informative, but like entertaining and fun. And also so like you are really good at remembering something that you didn't say like 10 minutes later. And you're like, and so bringing you back to this, like, just so you don't forget this piece. You're just such a great interviewee. You know what I didn't come
back to? So I started out like, there's the couple who like, they have low desire because they don't like the sex. What if you have struggled with desire, but you do like the sex, which was my situation? But unfortunately, the answer is the most complex affective neuroscience I've ever put in a book, and it took me 2 chapters to explain it. So I'm not going to manage it here. But if anyone has that situation, you're like, but I do like the sex, and I still struggle to get like in the door. Like I just can't get there wherever there is. Come Together is the book for you. It's out in paperback now. Your library will get it if they don't already have it.
Thank you.
Audiobook.
Amazing. Thank
It'll
you.
help.
Thank you so much.
Yes, you are, you're doing God's work.
Yes.
Truly. Thank you so much, Emily Nagoski, for joining us. I can't just say Emily. She's Emily Nagoski.
That's right.
And we are just so excited to have had you. Thank you.
It's absolutely my pleasure.
Bye-bye.
And thank you for giving me something to do today that feels important
Oh,
today.
what a nice That is
very
a beautiful sentiment. Perfect place to
Someone
end.
who's grateful
Yes.
for things.
Yes. Hope to cross paths again one day. Have a
Me
good
too.
one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Whew. Oh man, was she good?
Yeah. There's some guests where I just feel like I probably shouldn't be there. I felt like I just no, not that I'm a detractor. I just like to sit back. I don't want to involve myself too much. And I felt like that was one of those calls. I just wanted to listen. I wanted her to talk. I didn't want to interrupt her with questions that were going to derail her from her thoughts.
I know, like she was such a good interviewee. You can tell it's not her first rodeo. Like she's seasoned, but also dynamic, and it doesn't feel like practiced. It just feels like who she is. She's just so knowledgeable, and she's also so passionate about sharing her knowledge with the world.
There was one thing that I guess I'm just. I wonder what.
You looked like you wanted to ask another question towards the end.
There's a couple. There's a couple of questions I want to ask, but I didn't want to ruin the flow. But I did wonder if someone in a relationship who has the more, if there's an imbalanced sexual desire, and the one with the more sexual desire does all the right things.
Yeah, like what the exercises.
Everything she said, all the exercises, is totally understanding, gives space, doesn't force anything, and sex never happens.
Oh, so the person never comes around?
They never come around.
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder, how does that resolve itself?
I feel like if you're actively doing the exercises she's talking about, so you take time out to just lay and touch each other with no goal of it being sexual, or to write down the things about each other's bodies that you enjoy. Like you're actually being very diligent about doing the homework, and you still don't want to have sex. And I think then that becomes a bigger issue.
Probably a bigger issue. That's my guess. Is there's a bigger issue, but maybe not. And look, maybe we're gonna have sex robots soon, so this conversation is moot.
Yeah, isn't that weird?
Yeah,
sex robots.
I mean, it's gonna happen. We're like, first of all, it's already happened.
It's literally the reason why they're working on robots.
Yeah, it's a reason why they're working. Why is NVIDIA making these chips? They're making it because we want fast computers. It's all sex robot driven. Everything.
Okay, again, Emily's book is Come Together, The Science and Art of Creating Lasting Sexual Connections. And yes, if you enjoyed what you heard today, you know what we will ask of you, and that is to subscribe, hit the notification bell, follow us on Instagram and
TikTok.
Leave us Apple and
Spotify.
Podcast ratings and reviews. Tell your friends, and generally do all the things you would do to support a podcast you enjoy. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Dear Shandy. Bye-bye.